All right, get this. Our deep dive today is into a 1607 play.
1607.
Wow, the Whore of Babylon.
Okay, now that's a title that definitely grabs your attention.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely not your typical like lighthearted comedy.
No, not at all. And as you can probably guess, it's an allegory about Queen Elizabeth I and, get this, her conflict with the Catholic Church.
Whoa, so they just put that right out there on stage. Bold move back then.
Right. It makes you wonder what it must have been like to be in that audience. Talk about a scandalous night at the theater.
I can only imagine. So how does this play actually use allegory? I mean, to make its point. And what can we learn, about Queen Elizabeth's reign from it?
That's what we're going to find out. But first, a little background.
Okay.
The playwrights were pretty clever, actually. They created this whole world of fairies and demons.
It's fairies and demons, huh?
Yeah, and each character represents a real historical figure or entity.
Interesting.
Like, for example, Queen Elizabeth is portrayed as Titania.
Titania.
The fairy queen.
Ah, okay, I see. So like a stand-in for Elizabeth.
Exactly. So who do you think the Whore of Babylon represents in all of this?
Well, given the title and the time period, I'd have to guess the Catholic Church.
You got it. And remember, this was a time when England had just broken away from the Catholic Church, thanks to the Protestant Reformation.
Right. So tensions were running pretty high.
Exactly. And the play taps right into all those anxieties, fears, the whole shebang.
So basically, it's like a 17th century propaganda piece, but disguised as entertainment.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And it uses this really vivid, almost over-the-top imagery to demonize the Catholic Church.
Oh, I bet that went over well.
And portray Queen Elizabeth as, well, a righteous defender of the faith.
I bet there were some gasps from the audience back then.
I would think so. So we've got Titania representing Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
What kind of a leader does she come across as in the play?
Well, from what I've read, Titania is portrayed as the ideal Elizabethan ruler.
Okay, what does that mean?
Well, she's strong, she's intelligent, and cunning even. The play shows her resisting these three kings who, you guessed it, represent powerful Catholic rulers trying to woo her back to the Catholic fold.
So the whole political power struggle going on too.
Absolutely. Remember, England at this time was a young Protestant nation surrounded by powerful Catholic rivals.
Right, so they're like this little island trying to hold their own.
Exactly. And the play really reinforces this idea that England, and Queen Elizabeth specifically, has to stay strong, vigilant against these outside threats.
Now, I can't help but wonder how much of Titania's character is based on Elizabeth's actual personality and how much is just, creative embellishment.
That's a great question. It's likely a bit of both.
Okay.
We know Elizabeth was known for her intelligence, her political savvy.
Right.
But the play definitely plays that up, amplifies those qualities, creates this almost mythical image of her.
It's like they're saying, look at our amazing queen. She's brilliant, powerful, and nobody messes with her.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And that message, it would have resonated deeply with an audience, especially one that was still kind of figuring out what it meant to be a Protestant nation.
So the play sets up this epic clash between, on one side, Queen Elizabeth, represented as Titania, and then on the other side, the Catholic Church.
Right.
Symbolized by the Whore of Babylon. What are some of the tactics that each side uses in this, I guess, allegorical showdown?
Well, on the Catholic Church's side, let's just say they try everything.
Okay, like what? Give me some examples.
We've got seduction, political pressure, even some hints of dark magic.
Whoa, dark magic, like actual sorcery.
Well, not literally, but the play uses that imagery to represent the perceived threat. The three kings we talked about earlier, they offer Titania riches and power if she'll just submit to their authority.
Oh, so they're trying to buy her back, basically.
In a way, yeah. But Titania, she's not easily swayed.
I wouldn't expect her to be.
Right. But the play also depicts more, I guess you could say, sinister tactics.
Like what?
You've got cardinals spreading rumors, trying to sow discord among Titania's loyal fairies.
So like a smear campaign.
Exactly. And then there are even conjurers attempting to harm Titania through curses and spells.
Yikes, they really pulled out all the stops. I'm picturing all those special effects. The smoke and mirrors must have been quite a show.
Oh, I bet it was. The play is full of visual spectacle.
Like what?
There are these moments called dumb shows where the action unfolds silently, full of symbolism and visual metaphors.
Give me an example. What kind of metaphors are we talking about?
Okay, well, there's this one scene where a conjurer buries a picture of Titania in a dunghill.
Okay, that's a pretty graphic image.
Right. It's a way of representing those attempts to, like, smear her reputation, undermine her authority.
Yeah, I get it.
Right.
So Titania is facing all these threats. How does she respond?
Well, she's portrayed as a very strong and decisive leader. She relies on her wisdom, her courage, and the loyalty of her followers to overcome these challenges. But what's interesting is that she's not just a warrior queen, you know? The play also explores the themes of justice and mercy through her actions.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
Well, for example, there's this character, a doctor named Peridot, who gets caught up in a plot against Titania instead of, immediately punishing him.
Right.
She offers him a chance to repent and prove his loyalty.
So she's trying to be a just and fair ruler.
Exactly. And this is where the play gets really interesting. It's not just a simple good versus evil narrative.
Right.
It's trying to portray Titania, and by extension Queen Elizabeth, as this complex leader who understands the need for both justice and mercy.
So it's a more nuanced portrayal than you might expect.
Exactly. We've talked about the allegorical characters, the political tension, the religious tension, but there's something else you mentioned earlier that I want to dig into.
Okay, what's that?
You mentioned the Spanish Armada being part of the story. How does that historical event fit into this allegorical world?
That's a good question, and it's something we're going to unpack when we come back after a short break.
Looking forward to it.
All right, so we're back, and we can't talk about a play called The Whore of Babylon without, addressing the title itself.
Yeah, it's definitely a bold choice, especially for that time period.
It's not exactly subtle, is it?
Not at all, and it really shows how the play doesn't hold back in its portrayal of the Catholic Church.
Right. I mean, just the name alone is pretty provocative.
Oh, absolutely. You have to remember, though, this was written just a few decades after England broke away from the Catholic Church.
Right, with Henry VIII.
Exactly. The Protestant Reformation was in full swing, and there was a lot of religious tension, even violence, all across Europe.
So this play is tapping into those real fears, anxieties, all of that about the Catholic Church.
Oh, for sure. And it uses that imagery of the Whore of Babylon straight from the book of Revelation.
Okay, now for those of us who haven't cracked open Revelation lately, what exactly does the Whore of Babylon represent?
So in Revelation, the Whore of Babylon is this, lavishly dressed woman who symbolizes corruption, idolatry, turning away from God.
Okay, so not a very flattering image.
Not at all. And she's often associated with, false teachings, worldly temptations, that kind of thing.
So the playwrights are using this image to basically say, hey, the Catholic Church is bad news, and England was right to break away.
Exactly. It's a way of saying, hey, look, the Protestant Reformation was the right move, and showing Queen Elizabeth as this righteous leader, protecting England from a corrupting influence.
It's fascinating how a play can be so intertwined with the politics and religion of its time.
Oh, for sure. And the play doesn't just use symbolism either. They use some pretty strong language, too.
Like what?
There are lines about the church being drunk with the blood of the saints and spreading fornications and uncleanness.
Well, they really didn't hold back.
Not at all. But they also get into specifics about why the church was seen as a threat to England, not just throwing out general accusations.
Okay, so what were they worried about?
Well, one of the big concerns was the church trying to undermine English sovereignty.
Okay.
Remember those three kings trying to get Titania back in the Catholic fold?
Right, putting the pressure on.
Yeah, well, that reflects real anxieties about Catholic powers, like France and Spain trying to, influence English policies, maybe even overthrow the monarchy.
So they're feeding this fear that England is constantly under threat.
Exactly. You've got scenes with cardinals whispering in dark corners, conjurers casting spells, shady characters lurking about.
Sounds a little paranoid.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's the atmosphere they're creating. Paranoia and suspicion. It would have resonated with audiences who were already on edge about these threats.
Yeah, I could see how that would have been a real crowd pleaser, all that action and intrigue.
Oh, definitely. But they also went beyond external threats.
Okay.
They used the play to critique things within the Catholic Church itself.
Okay, like what kind of critiques?
Well, there's this scene where plain dealing visits an ordinary...
An ordinary? What's that?
Basically a tavern, where people would, drink, gamble, socialize.
Sounds like my kind of place.
Right. Well, not for plain dealing. He
Yeah.
watches everyone and sees hypocrisy, church followers preaching piety, but then engaging in all sorts of vices.
So they're saying there's a difference between what the church preaches and how people actually live.
Exactly. It's subtle, but it really undermines the church's moral authority.
Clever.
Right. Using different techniques, symbolism, strong language, even some humor to get their message across.
So it's a multi-layered critique.
It really is. But here's something interesting. Despite all this, the play doesn't condemn all Catholics as individuals.
Okay, how so?
Remember Titania showing mercy to Paradel, the doctor involved in the plot against her?
Right, right.
Well, that suggests they're making a distinction between the church leaders, who they paint as power-hungry and corrupt, and ordinary people who might be misled.
So it's not just a simple us versus them.
No, it's much more nuanced than that. And honestly, that complexity is part of what makes the Whore of Babylon so interesting. It reflects the reality of the time, individuals caught in the middle of these huge conflicts.
It's a good reminder that history isn't about clear-cut good guys and bad
Right,
guys.
it's about people wrestling with complex issues, making tough choices.
Trying to navigate a messy world.
Exactly, and the Whore of Babylon, with all its drama and allegory, gives us a peek into that world.
We've talked about the threats from Catholic powers, but you said the play critiques English society too. Tell me more about that.
So we have plain dealing, acting as a kind of social commentator.
The guy from the tavern scene?
That's him. Sharp wit, pointing out the flaws in everyone, even powerful people.
I like this guy.
Right. He criticizes extravagance, obsession with fashion, status, even lawyers.
What's wrong with lawyers?
He accuses them of being greedy, more interested in money than justice.
Okay, I can see why you said he's my kind of guy.
Right. He's like the voice of the common people, calling out the elite.
So the play isn't just promoting Elizabeth and bashing the church, it's looking at English society too.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, look, we might be the good guys in this religious fight, but that doesn't mean we're perfect.
It's refreshing to see that kind of self-awareness, even in propaganda.
I know, right? It adds depth and complexity, and that's part of what makes this play so fascinating. It's not one-dimensional.
More like a snapshot of a society dealing with all sorts of things, religion, politics, social issues.
Exactly. It reminds us that the past isn't simple, and even these texts with agendas can give us fascinating glimpses into how complex and contradictory a specific moment in time really was.
So we've seen the Catholic Church as the enemy, but the play also brings in the Spanish Armada, a real historical event.
Right.
What's the significance of that, and how does it fit into the allegory?
The Spanish Armada, launched by King Philip II of Spain in 1588, it becomes the symbolic representation of the ultimate threat to England in the play.
So it's not just about religion anymore, it's about England's survival.
Absolutely. They portray it as a direct attack on their sovereignty, on their Protestant identity.
Makes sense.
It's like all those Catholic plots we've seen, they all come together in this epic clash.
How do they even stage a naval battle on a stage?
Oh, you know it was a spectacle. They used every trick in the book, sound effects, special lighting, maybe even pyrotechnics to show the cannons firing.
Wow, I wish we had videos of those performances.
I know, right? The play really emphasizes the patriotism, the national pride, after defeating the Armada.
It must have been a powerful moment for the audience.
For sure, England triumphs, and Queen Elizabeth. She's portrayed as the mastermind behind it all.
So the Spanish Armada, a real event, gets woven into the allegory to really drive home England's strength and Elizabeth's leadership.
Exactly. It's really clever storytelling. By connecting the play's fantasy to a real event, they make it feel immediate and relevant to the audience.
Right, they're not just talking about abstract ideas, this was a real threat.
Exactly. It's like they're saying, see, these threats are real, they're happening right now, and we need to be ready.
It's incredible how a play from over 400 years ago can still speak to us about storytelling and how it can be used to shape perceptions, explore complex issues, even push political agendas.
You got it. The Whore of Babylon is a reminder that theater has always been more than just entertainment.
Right, it's a platform for ideas, a way to engage with the big issues.
And a powerful tool for shaping how people think.
We've talked about the heavy stuff, religion, politics, war.
Yeah.
But I know there's also a lot of humor, wordplay in the play. Let's lighten things up and talk about that side of the Whore of Babylon.
I'm all for that. Little levity after all that serious discussion.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time talking about those really heavy themes in the Whore of Babylon. You know, religious conflict, the political intrigue.
Yeah, all that serious stuff.
But like you said earlier, the playwrights didn't just want to hit the audience over the head with doom and gloom.
Right, there's definitely a lighter side to the play too.
Exactly. It's not all serious all the time. There's humor sprinkled in, some witty dialogue.
Even some slapstick comedy in places.
Yeah, and I think that humor is actually pretty important.
Oh, absolutely. It helps to balance out the serious themes.
Yeah, and it makes the play more accessible to a wider audience, you know?
Definitely. Keeps people engaged.
Like, they've figured out how to keep people entertained while still making them think.
Exactly. Sneaking in those thought-provoking ideas when you least expect it.
And a lot of that humor comes from the characters themselves.
Oh, for sure.
Like we've already talked about Plain Dealing, right?
Yeah.
And his role as this social commentator.
Yeah, he's great. Always pointing out the hypocrisy and the absurdity of everyone around him.
Exactly. But there are other characters who bring a bit of levity to the play, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like I remember reading about this group of fairies who are always bickering and getting into mischief.
Oh, yeah, those fairies. They're always up to something.
I love those kinds of characters.
Me too.
They add a bit of chaos, you know?
Yeah. And unpredictability.
Makes you wonder what they're going to do next.
Right. Plus, they provide some much-needed comic relief, you know, from all the political and religious drama.
So it's not all like fire and brimstone and allegorical battles.
No, definitely not. There are moments where we can just enjoy the characters, you know, watch them interact and be silly.
That's what makes it a good play, I think.
Totally agree. There's a little something for everyone in the Whore of Babylon.
Speaking of well-rounded, we've talked about the dialogue, the characters, but we haven't really touched on the visual spectacle of it all.
Yeah, good point.
Remember those dumb shows we mentioned earlier?
Oh, yeah. How could I forget? Those are some of the most memorable moments in the play.
Totally. It's like they decided to take a break from all the talking and just let the visuals tell the story.
Exactly. And those visuals were often super striking, very symbolic.
Yeah, they were. Like, remember that scene where a conjurer buries a picture of Titania in a dunghill?
Oh, yeah. That one was powerful.
Right. Such a strong image. It really showed the disrespect, the malice directed towards Queen Elizabeth.
Absolutely. They really wanted to drive that point home.
And there are other dumb shows that are equally memorable.
Whoa, yeah, for sure.
Like the one where Truth is shown sleeping while Time tries to wake her up.
Ah, yes. That's a really interesting one.
Right. It's a pretty deep message to communicate without any words.
It is. But that's what's so cool about these dumb shows. They can get across these complex ideas in a really direct and impactful way.
Right. It's like they're speaking to the audience on a different level.
Exactly. Using symbolism, movement, creating a whole other layer of meaning.
And these dumb shows also remind us that the Whore of Babylon was written to be performed, you know?
Right. For a live audience.
It's meant to be seen, not just read.
Exactly.
So we have to imagine those flickering candles, the costumes, the music, everything that would have brought the play to life on stage.
It would have been a completely immersive experience.
Oh, definitely. When you think about all those elements, it's clear that the Whore of Babylon was more than just a play. It was a real event.
Totally. A major spectacle.
It was a mix of political commentary, religious propaganda, and just pure entertainment.
Yeah, all rolled into one.
And that's what makes it so interesting to study.
Yeah, for sure.
It gives us this glimpse into Elizabethan theater and how playwrights use their skills to talk about the big issues of the day.
It's like a time capsule of their world and their concerns.
So we've talked about the allegory, the symbolism, the humor, the spectacle, all these different layers of the Whore of Babylon.
Yeah, we've really dug deep into this one.
But what's the takeaway? What do you think the playwrights were trying to do?
At its heart, I think the Whore of Babylon is really a celebration of England's national identity and a way to really drive home those Protestant values.
Like they're saying, this is who we are. We're England, we're Protestant, and we're standing our ground.
Exactly. And they do that by showing Queen Elizabeth as this strong and wise leader who protects her nation from inside and out.
Right. They make the Catholic Church look bad, like a force of evil and corruption, and then England triumphs over them.
Yeah. They're basically saying that England, this Protestant nation, is a shining light in a world full of, you know, religious and political chaos.
It's a message that would have really resonated with audiences back then, especially with the threat of Catholic power still looming.
Oh, absolutely. It would have felt very timely and relevant to them.
The Whore of Babylon is such a fascinating, complex work.
It really is.
It gives us a glimpse into what people were thinking and feeling during this turbulent period of history.
Yeah, it challenges us to see the past not just as dates and facts, but as a story, you know, with all the drama and the passion and even the funny moments.
This play, with its mix of allegory and drama and propaganda, reminds us to explore that story, to really wrestle with those big questions about power, faith, and national identity.
It's a reminder that the past is full of surprises and contradictions.
and that those stories from the past can still speak to us today.
Absolutely.
Well, there you have it. Our deep dive into the Whore of Babylon. This 1607 play shows us that history isn't just boring old stuff in a textbook. It's full of intrigue and passion and even humor.
It's a reminder that theater has always had this power to engage with the big questions and show us what it was like to live through those times.
Thanks for joining us on this journey through Elizabethan England. And remember, keep exploring those hidden corners of history. You never know what you might find.